before we get into my review of Catching Fire, I want to talk about something non-book related, and that would be my totally awesome shoes! I love these things. They're so glittery. I know that you don't usually get to see my shoes, and half the time I'm not even wearing shoes, but I still had these on, and I was like, I kind of want to show them off because they're glittery. They give me like 2 extra inches of height, and they're super comfortable. I mean, I don't usually get to have really fun shoes that are also comfortable, but these do it for me. So thank goodness for eBay, because I don't know when these were last sold in store, but I tend to be behind the curve when it comes to cool things, and so I'm just so thankful for people who do buy them when they're in store and then decide, I don't want it anymore. So yeah, there we go. I mean, they're just the perfect shoe for someone who's on her feet all day at work and still wants to be stylish. Yeah. Anyways, let's move on. As I said, today I'm talking about Catching Fire, and if you have not been an active member of society for the last 10 years, then this is going to be very informative for you. Catching Fire is the 2nd book in the Hunger Games series. Technically, it is the 3rd book in her Hunger Games world, if you are aware that there's another prequel called The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. But this is the one that catches us up on life after the Hunger Games. And if you saw my Hunger Games review, then you know that the impossible happened, and I had no complaints about a book. So I guess Catching Fire makes up for that. Not to say that I had a lot of problems with it, but there were some things in this book that bothered me, and I didn't quite understand, or I wish had been done differently, whereas I didn't get those feelings from the Hunger Games. But I'm not going to get into that just yet. First, I'm going to tell you what the book is about. As I said, Catching Fire basically catches us up on Katniss's life after the Hunger Games. If you have not heard of the Hunger Games either, well then, you need to go watch my other review, you need to go to the library, you need to Google some stuff. But the main character of this series is a 17-year-old girl named Katniss Everdeen, and she lives in a world where the teenagers in their society are sent into this arena to battle it out to the death. She and her district mate, Peeta, were sent in the previous book, and then they both survive, which again is very unique because usually there's only one victor per Hunger Games, but Katniss beat the system, and she was able to save both herself and Peeta, who acted as her love interest as a ploy to kind of win favor with the people and help them win. Now, we're picking up with life after the Hunger Games. She had, at the end of the 1st book, told Peeta it was all an act, so that has made things really awkward. So that has made things really awkward between them, which kind of upsets Katniss, because even though she doesn't love Peeta, she had grown to care for him. He is someone that she values for more than one reason, but she was sorry to lose him as a friend. But after a person wins the Hunger Games, they do have some responsibilities, and one of those responsibilities is to visit all of the other districts and be like, hey, what's up? Thanks, see you later, Asta, and then they come back to their own district and they have this massive party, and then they get to go back to the big fancy house that they won because they were the victor of the Hunger Games. So we open up with Katniss being like, yeah, my life kind of sucks because I won the Hunger Games, because I can no longer have the life that I used to have, which is ironic because the life that she used to have was pretty terrible. Like, she didn't have enough food to eat half the time, she didn't really have any money, it was just pretty lousy. But now that she has all this money, she doesn't know what to do with herself. Like, she doesn't need to hunt, she doesn't need to provide for her family, and so she's like, I'm pretty useless. So I liked that. I liked how we started off with this tension of you should be happy. You won the Hunger Games. 1, you didn't die. 2, you got the super fancy house. 3, now you're set for life. You never have to go back to the Hunger Games. You don't have to worry about food. You don't have to worry about money. But for someone who has actively had to do something to survive, you can see why this is problematic for her. So we have that, but then we also have her tension with Peeta because they basically have nothing to do with each other anymore. And so it's kind of like, I don't really know what to do, especially since we have this tour that we have to go on to, like, say hello to all the districts. And then she has Gale, who in their love triangle was the third point, because in the first book, she titled him her best friend. But we also got these romantic undertones, which are obviously going to be at odds with the love story that she and Peeta were presenting to the public for the games. So it's like, how do I behave around both boys? How do I go back to my normal life when there really is no more normal life? So right before she goes on this victory tour, she is confronted by President Snow, who, if you have read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, if you've seen my review of it, you know he's a pretty major character. If you're still clueless about the entire world of the Hunger Games, President Snow is the president of their world, which is called Panem, which is basically this dystopian society that at some point had gone to war with each other, nearly killed everybody off, but they didn't, and now the capital, which is where he resides and rules from, has all of the districts who had risen up against them. He has, each district send a girl and a boy to the Hunger Games, and there we go. But because what Katniss did in the Hunger Games to win was to basically subvert them by threatening to eat these poisonous berries, it meant they wouldn't have had a victor. And so they kind of tricked the capital into letting them live, and Snow's not happy about that. Like, for one, he's a smart guy. He knows that she was playing them for fools, that this whole love story thing wasn't really a thing. And second, and this is something that, I like, but I kind of question, is that he senses that this act of rebellion of hers in the Hunger Games is going to start a chain reaction of rebellion in the other districts, because it's been a couple decades where they've been under the capital's thumb. And, with the exception of a handful of them, they aren't treated very well. So it's only a matter of time before the people are going to rise up against the capital. Anyways, before the victory tour, President Snow visits Katniss at this brand spanking new house of hers, and he threatens her. He's like, I know that you and Peeta lied about your whole romance, but everybody believes it. However, I'm not everybody, and if you don't want to be punished, if you don't want your loved ones to be punished, then you need to convince me on this tour that you truly love Peeta. Well, Katniss, who has terrible people skills and who is an even worse actress, is like, what? Because ever since this whole love story angle came out, Gale has had to be labeled as her cousin in order to prevent people from catching on, which I guess it's just a hard concept for me to wrap my mind around, because, just because you're in love at one point in your life doesn't mean you're gonna stay in love with that same person. How many divorces have we seen that can prove that fact? But I guess in this society, it's just something that's going to have to stick with her. Because every Hunger Games, we are shown past victors, and that is part of her win. So it's something that's going to have to be revisited every year. So it's something that she's going to have to maintain. She and Peeta embark on this victory tour, and the first place they go is District 11. Peeta and Katniss are from District 12, which is the furthest reaching district. There used to be a District 13, but in the rebellion, District 13 had been wiped off the map. The first place that they visit is District 11, and this is important for a variety of reasons. One is that Katniss, as I said, no people skills. And she is a loner by nature, which kind of makes it surprising that she has any friends. But she had befriended and allied herself with a young girl named Rue from District 11. And then the boy tribute from District 11 ended up saving her life because of her actions towards Rue. And so when they get to District 11, first, during their acceptance speech or whatever you want to call it, Peeta says, we want these families to have some of our winnings for the rest of our lives. And then she gives her own little impromptu speech, which ends up in something of a riot. And from there, she sees what President Snow meant when he said that rebellion can catch fire. Because from then on out, she starts to see things that she probably never would have paid attention to before, which is something that, it's not a bad thing about the book, but when I sit back and think about it, it bothers me because she's represented as a very intelligent, capable person. Yet, she is completely clueless when it comes to seeing the big picture, to recognizing how her actions can have big consequences. And for someone who has a lot of foresight, I find it hard to believe that she just wouldn't get it. Because even with eating those berries, she chose to eat the berries because she knew the effect it would have on the Capitol, that the effect it would have on the Hunger Games. So she is capable of seeing the truth behind the situation and in seeing how things can be manipulated and how her actions can result in something else. So the fact that she wouldn't see her blatant act of rebellion as an act of rebellion that other people might cotton onto doesn't quite sit right with me. I can see how she would not understand the full extent of her eating these berries and the full extent of her pretending to be in love with Peeta and how that's going to stay with her for the rest of her life, because it really was about surviving the Hunger Games. But yeah, as I said, I do think it's a little out of character for her to be so clueless. Anyways, they finish off this victory tour, they end up at the Capitol, and there's this big party thrown, and then Snow throws this little wrench in the mix, and he's like, oh, Peeta and Katniss are getting married, blah-de-blah-de-blah, and Katniss is like, well, I mean, basically, I knew this was going to happen, so I just have to grin and bear it, and then she comes in contact with the new head game maker, Plutarch Heavensby, and they had a little spin around the floor, and he shows her his pocket watch, which has this hidden Mockingjay symbol, and then he gives her some cryptic words, and she's just like, what? At any rate, Katniss and Peeta get back to District 12, and they're kind of resettling into life. Katniss is facing this wedding, but they're also facing the Quarter Quell, which means every 25 years there is a special Hunger Games. For example, one Hunger Games, it was the number of tributes sent into the arena was doubled. So instead of 24, they now have 48. Well, President Snow, who is a really great villain, we are led to assume, has orchestrated it so that Katniss will be sent back in. And so the rule this year is that a tribute will be reaped from past victors, which goes against one of the perks of being a victor, which is you never have to go back to the Hunger Games. But they wanted to prove that even the strongest sometimes don't survive. This sends Katniss into a tailspin, which is natural. I mean, like, it's the most horrific event of your life. You fought for your life, and now you have to do it again against people who are proven warriors. Katniss had gone to Haymitch and said, look, Peeta saved me in the last Hunger Games, now I want to save him. So if his name is called, I want you to volunteer for him. And, you know, like, Haymitch is one of my favorite characters because you never really know what's fact and fiction with him. He's very unreliable. And so we already know that he has some deal going with Peeta, that Peeta has already approached him. And Katniss's thought is that Peeta wants to continue to save her. So he does not want Haymitch to volunteer to go in his stead. He wants to work with Haymitch in order to continue to keep Katniss alive. And so she and Haymitch forge an alliance, or, you know, they make a pact, and then she goes on her way, and then the reaping comes. And of course, Katniss is reaped because she's the only female available, and then Haymitch is called, but Peeta volunteers for him, and there we go. So now we're back at the Capitol preparing for the Hunger Games. And my initial reservation about this book was that I felt like it was a bit underdeveloped, that I didn't get enough Hunger Games. Because, spoiler alert, we end the book with the Hunger Games. At least in the last book, we had a little lead up to the Hunger Games, and then we had some wrap up after the Hunger Games, but with this one, that's basically where we end. But after reading it a couple more times, I really began to like these Hunger Games even more than the first ones, and my complaint was still, like, we're done, but it was more that I wanted more. Like, that was so fast. But the biggest difference between this Hunger Games and the last, of course, is the whole Victor thing. All the Victors are friends. And so you get this added layer of sadness, of emotion, because it's one thing to go into an arena and have to kill people you don't know. It's another thing to have to kill people you do know, especially because a number of these Victors, their win was 10, 20, 30 years ago, if not more. And so that now they have had time to establish a life. So they're leaving behind husbands, children, whatever they've done. I thought that was really smart of Suzanne Collins, without even having to meet these Victors. Hearts still break for them, and we still want them to win, yet we know there can only be one winner, and we want Katniss to win. The tributes all, or the Victors technically, all stand up at their interviews and, like, provide this solid front of how could you do this to us. And so it's still kind of building at this rebellion of, like, the Capitol is doing things it shouldn't do, and you out there need to be aware that this is not right. Like, we should not be going back into this. We should not be sending our children into this. This needs to end. It doesn't have an effect on anything, and they all go into the arena, and this time, the arena is a water arena. In the last book, it was kind of like a woodsy arena. In this one, the first thing they see is that they are divided into watery wedges, and in order to get to the cornucopia, which is where they can get weapons or food and supplies, they have to swim there. And the thing is, not everybody knows how to swim, because not every district has a place to learn how to swim. So there's our first hurdle. Katniss, who, you know, I'm okay with this, but, you know, she's given just enough capabilities to be able to survive these things, and sometimes I'd be like, you know, like, that's just too easy. Why is she able to do this? I'm okay, but she had learned how to swim, so she's able to get to the cornucopia just fine. Pete, on the other hand, does not know how to swim, and so there are a couple major players in this book, and one is Finnick Odair. So I love him. Like, one thing I really liked about this book is how many other Hunger Games that we got glimpses into, and he is a superstar. He is famous because he won his Hunger Games at the tender age of 14. I think it is, your first drawing is at 12 and your last drawing is at 18. So he was relatively young when it came to being pulled for the Hunger Games. But he comes from a fishing village, so of course water is his life. So this is a no-brainer for him. But he had won his Hunger Games because he's an expert with a trident. But then from there, he just got this, because he's a gorgeous boy, he got this reputation as kind of a gadabout. Like, in a way, he's something of a prostitute. He is known for being gifted to people in the Capitol. And what I loved about that, too, is even though he's a victor, it's all about manipulation with the Capitol. Like, that's what the Hunger Games are. They are games. And so, even though he's a victor, his life is still not his own. And so, he is basically doled out to the highest bidder. And what we learn is that at some point, money isn't an object to him. And so he lets people do what they want with him in exchange for secrets. We meet Finnick, who, if you know, in the last Hunger Games, is kind of helpful to ally. And I did mention how Katniss allied herself with Rue. Well, she was like, I don't want to ally myself with anybody this time. I just wanted to be me and Peeta. Well, Haymitch went behind their backs and was like, I'm going to ally you with Finnick. And so now she's allied with Finnick, and where I left off was Finnick went to get Peeta, and then he, Mags, Peeta, and Katniss all, scamper off into the brush. And it takes Katniss a while to trust him. As I said, no people skills. And so she's like, why in the world would Finnick want to ally himself with us? She had grown to respect Mags, so she was cool with that. But she was just like, is this all a ploy for Finnick? Because he was pretty deadly in his Hunger Games. And so she was like, what is his motive? And then she notices that he kind of does things to protect Peeta, and she's still like, should I kill him? Should I not kill him? And that's one thing I like, but I kind of struggle with in this book is Katniss's bloodlust, because for me, that's the kind of person she is. She's a survivor, but she has this constant internal struggle of, what kind of person do I want to be? And that sounds really bad. But I expect her to go for the gold. Yet, she's like, maybe that's not the right thing to do. Maybe I should be kinder about it. Maybe I should be more like Peeta. And I'm like, I mean, Katniss, I like you and all, but you're thinking too much. Like, just do it already. Like, you're the kind of person I expect you to be is someone who's not constantly thinking of others first. Because as terrible as that sounds, she's not. Peeta is the sympathetic one. Katniss is the one people like because of Peeta. So our quartet is in the jungle, trying to figure things out, test boundaries, see what the parameters are, and Katniss realizes that the entire arena is surrounded by a force field, but she doesn't realize this in time to stop Peeta from hitting it with his knife, and he is electrocuted and essentially killed. Finnick is able to bring him back with CPR, and then they're like, you know what? Let's just stop here for the day. So they bed down, and then about midnight, they hear this bonging. And what that means is, spoiler alert, the arena is actually a giant clock. And so that bonging is when the horrors will start. And so each section of this arena has a different horror that will start at a different time of night or day. In the particular horror for their current section is this poisonous fog that can affect the nervous system. So they're trying to run away from it. But as I said, it's affecting their nervous system, so it's affecting their ability to control their limbs. And what they realize is that there's no way that they can escape. So what ends up happening is that Mags sacrifices herself so that Finnick can carry Peeta to safety. And now Katniss is like, what is going on here? She's already been struggling with what to do with Finnick. Like, do I kill him? Do I not kill him? What are his motives? And then she's like, well, why did Finnick save Peeta? Because wouldn't he have wanted another dead victor? Like, wouldn't have that been less competition for him? And then, why is Mags sacrificing herself for Peeta? Like, what's going on here? And she starts to wonder if maybe it's all just one giant plot to save PETA. In any case, they get out of there without further harm, learn that by submerging themselves in the salt water, they can draw the poisons out of them. They do encounter a couple of other horrors, and then they team up with 3 other victors. There's Beatty and Wirus, who are from District, can't quite remember, it's the Tech District. And then there is Joanna Mason, who has got to be one of my favorite characters. Part of it is because the actress who portrays her in Catching Fire and Mockingjay does such an excellent job. I love how hardcore Joanna is. She's from District 7, which is basically the Forest District, so she's deadly with an axe, and she cracks me up. I just think she's amazing. I love her. But she reminds me of Katniss in that she's like, I don't take crap, all right? Like, I'm here for number 1, and I don't suffer fools. And so she can't stand Beatty and Wirus, who are nicknamed Nuts and Bolts, because, as the nickname intimates, they are weird. And so she's like, I saved them for you, and they're complete idiots, and blah, blah, blah. And Katniss is, again, she's like, why would Joanna Mason save Beatty and Wirus for me? Like, what's the big deal? In the end, it's basically, I think, there's the 3 of them, so there's 6 of them, and then the only other victors that they really have to worry about are the careers, who are coming from 1, 2, and 4. So I guess Beatty and Wirus are 3. The best way to take them out is to take out their food source. So what we have to do is electrocute everything in the water. And so Beatty is like, all right, I've got this wire. We have to connect it to this tree, which instigates the beginning of each horror. So there's this lightning that hits this tree, and then, at the hour, a new horror starts. So it's like, we have to connect the wire from the tree and bring it down to the water, and there we go, and then we'll have an advantage over them because we know how to feed ourselves and they don't. What happens is the careers catch up to them, and they cut the wire, and then just chaos, all right? And so what happens is then Joanna knocks Katniss out, starts cutting up her arm, and then seemingly leaves her to die. And Katniss is like, I knew it, like, this was all a ploy. I bet that Finnick is now attacking PETA, and I've got to save him. I'm gonna go back to the tree where we started. I'm gonna rescue PETA, and there we go. Well, she gets there, and basically everyone is gone. Seems that something has happened to Beatty, so now he's unconscious on the ground, and she's forming a plan when she remembers something that Haymitch had told her about know who your enemies are. And what she realizes, and this is a big spoiler, is that her enemies are not the other victors. Her enemies are the Capitol. They are President Snow and the Capitol. So what she does is she attaches the wire to her arrow, and then she lets it loose right as the lightning strikes. And then, so I'm really, like, as many times as I've read this book, I still don't quite understand how this all works, but by shooting the arrow and it getting struck by lightning, and then whatever, I guess it's tied around the tree, so I guess somehow that enables the whole arena to explode, or not the arena, but the force field. It explodes the force field around the arena, and then Katniss is like, okay, I'm dying, and she feels herself being lifted into the air, and she's like, oh, that's the Capitol, they've come to get me, and they're going to do whatever they're going to do with me. But she wakes up not in a Capitol hovercraft, but in a hovercraft from... Wait for it! District 13. Now, if you remember, I told you, District 13 had been destroyed. So, yeah, not at all. Like, that was not true. What had happened is District 13, everybody thought they were graphite miners. They were actually in charge of nuclear weapons. And so in the war that basically started the Hunger Games, they were destroyed, But because of the threat of what they could do with their nuclear weapons, they were not actually destroyed. And so all these people and all these rumors going to District 13, talking about District 13, proved to be true. But the rebel leaders turn out to be Plutarch Heavensbee, who, with his cryptic words, had been cluing Katniss into the fact that the arena was a clock. So it's him, and then it is Coin, who is basically the leader of District 13, and then, Haymitch and a couple other people. And their plan had been to get everybody out of the arena, but things had gone awry, and so they were only able to rescue Katniss and Finnick. And so now Katniss is losing her mind because she was not able to save Peeta, because they left Peeta in the arena, and now the Capitol has him. And that's essentially where we leave off. But what I love about this book is that nothing is what it seems. There are all these little seeds, and even in Hunger Games, there are all these little seeds about the possibility that District 13 might not have been wiped out. Like, maybe there's something there. Then it's like, no, Katniss, no, like, that's ridiculous. What a terrible theory. Or even when she wants to start her own uprising, because the whole deal about catching fire is that what she did in the Hunger Games is going to incite the rest of the districts to try to pull away from the Capitol, try to overtake the Capitol. So she sees all these little things about other districts having uprisings, and she's like, well, maybe District 12 needs to have an uprising. And she's like, and everybody else is like, no, Katniss, like, we can't do that, like, don't even think about it. Yet, that was the whole plan during the entire Hunger Games, was let's get these victors out of there, and then let's start a war against the Capitol. So now I want to talk about the things that bothered me in Catching Fire. One of them I've touched on, and that is Katniss's inability to make up her mind. And I just couldn't quite get on board with how she didn't know what she wanted to do or how she wanted to feel. So for one, in the Hunger Games, just from a human level, I like that she just didn't go in guns blazing. But at the same time, I was like, where's the Katniss from our last book who knew what had to be done and went for it? Like, maybe that's just part of a character arc where a character has to go through these questioning times to try to figure out really what they think or where they stand. But I was just like, Katniss, make up your mind. Just do something. Just be decisive, okay? That's what drew me to you in the first place. And then on the same note, her indecision between Peeta and Gale grated on my nerves. I was okay with it in the first book because it was a true struggle. In this book, you get to see Gale a little bit more, and then you get a true comparison between him and Peeta. And my thought is, what does Katniss see in Gale? Except for the fact that he's a really attractive guy and he's her only friend? What do they have in common? Because he hates what basically the Capitol has done to her. And, I try to play devil's advocate. I try to see things from his side. Because if I were sitting back and I were to see how she's acting out this love story with someone else, or how she's playing the Capitol's games, or how she is letting the Capitol, like, make her over and stuff, I'd probably be like, you know what? I'm not okay with this. But at the same time, don't you understand that that is how she had to survive? I guess he just lets his emotions overshadow his judgment. And so he is constantly kind of attacking Katniss and being mean to her. And I'm like, what did you see in him? Yeah, he helped you hunt, But even before all this started, you disagreed on your views on the Capitol. Like, he was always raging against them. And while you saw his point, you were just like, what are we gonna do about it? And so now that she is kind of having to do something about it, he doesn't like it. And he has this constant animosity towards whatever's going on with her and Peeta. I mean, if someone's constantly attacking you and ignoring you and just all around being incredibly rude, like, why do you think that they would choose you over someone who would have done anything to keep you alive? You know? And Peeta is a really nice guy. He's really sweet, which is funny considering some of the things that he says in Mockingjay. But so I just was like, this is why I'm Team Peeta. I was just really irritated with Katniss because she would have one thought and she'd be like, but what about Gale? How does this affect Gale? What might Gale be thinking while he's watching this? Gale should be glad she's still alive, all right? Not jealous that she's with some other guy. I can see why he'd be jealous, but hasn't she assured him that it's all an act? I don't know. I really started to take issue with Gale here because I honestly didn't see why he was even a consideration anymore. You know, and as far as Peeta goes, I didn't have a problem with him, but I did kind of have a problem with Katniss's determination to keep him alive. It felt a bit put on. Like, I know she has this thing about owing people, and so she, in the beginning, like even before Hunger Games, Peeta had done something that essentially kept her and her family alive. So she already felt like she owed him for that. And then she feels like she owes him for keeping her alive during the Hunger Games. And so now she's like, all right, I'm not going to be selfish. It's not going to be about me. It's going to be about Peeta. But even then, it felt like it was more about her. Because even though they'd forged this friendship that I really liked, I thought it was so sweet, I felt like her motivation was still more about redeeming herself than about helping Peeta. You're not trying to save Peeta because you value him as a person. You're trying to save Peeta because you think he's a better person than you are, and therefore you think he needs to survive. And I was just like, I want you to save Peeta because you think Peeta is worth saving, not to pay him back for keeping you alive. That's about it. I totally recommend it. Again, it's narrated. As you saw my review of the Hunger Games, you'll know that I'm putting a warning label on the original Hunger Games audiobook. I have not listened to the one that they redid with a new narrator, like their special edition, but the first narrator might not be exciting enough for many readers. I know her from Law & Order, and so I don't mind listening to her. But yeah, if you want to check it out, I think she does a great job in general. There are just moments where I'm like, maybe not everybody's gonna get it. They're not gonna like the way that she narrates. But that's up to you. I loved how, again, you kept questioning people's motives. You wanted to know what was going to happen, who was going to die, like how is this leading up to something else. Go for it. I hope you like this review, and I'll see you later. Bye!